So today we are going to delve into the ancient Near East, ancient Mesopotamia, and briefly also look at the art of ancient Persia. Area here, each of these settlements becomes its own little country in effect, with its own head, its own leader, who is sort of like a warrior / king. And then they're also at war with one another constantly, trying to take each other over, because it's a lot easier to sack a city and steal from it than make your own goods. So it's a very warlike society, as you might suspect. With the development of religion, we see the one of the biggest motivators emerge in humankind in order to produce art and architecture. And we sort of hinted at that with Stonehenge and having to move those big rocks 27 miles in order to set up this sort of astrological calendar and alignment to the summer solstice and that kind of thing. Same is the case here. We start to get large scale items. Since we're settled, we don't have, everything doesn't have to be portable anymore. We can carry it with us. And so we start to have not only larger works of art, but larger works of architecture, established pieces of architecture, not just houses made out of woolly mammoth bones and that sort of thing. And of course, the biggest are going to be dedicated to gods and goddesses. The early religion of the Sumerians was polytheistic, meaning it had many different gods and goddesses, but the main ones were Marduk and Inanna and Ishtar and a couple of others. Usually they had some sort of relationship to the environment. So Inanna, Ishtar, which was eventually a combination of Inanna and Ishtar, came together to form Inanna Ishtar. She was the goddess of the harvest. We have other gods and goddesses that have to do with rainstorms and dust storms and the god of the sun and that sort of thing. So this is how people were able to make sense of the world around them. If they couldn't explain it, well, it must be a god or goddess that's doing it. And so you want to pay tribute to these deities, and so you build temples in their honor. You make sacrifices to them because you don't want to piss them off. They might erupt a volcano on you or something like that, or cause your crops to fail, or a plague to beset your people. So they make every effort to please the gods and goddesses, and one of the ways they do that is to make temples. Most of the temples worldwide at this point are made at the highest point possible, usually on top of a mountain. If you don't have a mountain, then you make one. So that's what these earliest ziggurats are. They're artificial mountains. And this is the oldest one that's still somewhat intact. It's the White Temple at Iraq, which is in modern day Iraq. And you can see it's eroded a pretty good bit. But you can still see some of the processional stairs in order to make your way up to the top, where the temple, or the cella, C-E-L-L-A, would be. That's the holy sanctum, the residence of the gods and goddesses on top of the artificial mountain. It is the center of activity in every city-state. The ziggurat is in the center, and then the rest of the town, city-state, evolves from around it, which will be the case as we go through history. In Europe, when they build cathedrals, they build the cathedrals first to accommodate all of the traveling pilgrims, and then the hotels show up, the inns and the taverns, the merchants, and they grow out from there. So it's not uncommon to find places of worship in the city center, because more often than not, that's why the city itself was founded. There's another view. I know it doesn't look like much, and it's not. It's not in good shape. Centuries, millennia of sandstorms have eroded this down to what you see here. It would have had a dirt core, and then on the outside of that, bricks, sun-baked bricks, and occasionally interspersed with fired bricks in order to shore up the outside and give it a more smooth and supernatural sort of appearance. I'll show you a more intact example in just a minute. But this is what we're shooting for. This is what it would have looked like back in the day based on surviving writings and illustrations and the monument itself. You can see the temple on top, the cella. That's the Holy of Holies. That's where the priests would reside and accept offerings to the deity. We would include in that area probably an effigy of the deity, some sort of statue representing the deity, and then you could also go and leave your offerings of cattle, grain, that kind of thing, in order to ensure that you have a good harvest or something along those lines. What is interesting about this one, by the way, here it is nowadays. This was a photo of it. This is from the top, kind of looking down. It's in modern Iraq, and there's a nice military helicopter there to give you a sense of scale. Now we can still see the procession, the stairs to get up there. You don't just walk in off the street and then enter into the Holy of Holies. That wouldn't be very impactful. And so there's kind of a psychological build-up, a bent axis approach, if you will. So there's an initial set of stairs, and then you walk up those stairs, and then you walk up a second ramp. My battery's dying, so forgive me. So up the stairs, around the ramp, and then you walk all the way around again. And then by the time you get to then you can go into the cella. So why? Why do they do that? Because they want to sort of psych you up for this religious experience. They need to underscore the fact that this isn't just any house or any sort of dwelling. This is where the gods live. This is the house of Uruk or Inanna or Ishtar. This is who lives here. So it's some place special. And the longer it takes you to get into there, and you can see it the whole time, you're really getting psyched up. And then you finally make it to the top. This is a view of what's there now. Not a whole heck of a lot, but you can see the remains of the cella and some fragments of a sort of hypo-style hall or an audience chamber. This is what it would have looked like back in the day. You can see that it's got these tall, skinny windows here to allow light on the inside. It does allow light in, but not much. That's also part of the psychological buildup, this dimly lit interior with all of these flickering torches. It really underscores the psychology of the place. Remember, you can't see these gods or goddesses. You just have to believe that they are there, whether you're there and whether you see them or not. So the more that we can kind of communicate the supernaturality and sacredness of the space, the better. And light is a good way to do that. We're humans. We react to light. I mean, if you're in a dark room, you get apprehensive. What the hell's going on? What's in the shadows over there? Is there a threat? What's happening? So we automatically react to dimly lit space, and we're on our guard and kind of jazzed up. Combine that with these flickering torches and oil lamps and so forth. Maybe there's some guy in the corner playing the lyre to give you a musical sort of interlude. All of those things kind of come together to communicate sanctity and supernaturality and that kind of thing. It's an old idea, and later builders of churches and cathedrals and temples will pick up on this and continue it, as you'll see, all the way up into churches today are built kind of the same way. You have an approach, and you don't just walk in off the street and sit on the altar. you're at the back, and you can see it way up there. And then the priest or the preacher is up on a dais. He's on a lectern behind a podium. There's a lot of ornament and planning with regard to the architecture to make you feel like you are in a sacred sort of space. Now, what about sculpture? You can see we've got a pretty good jump with regard to naturalism in sculpture. This is one of the oldest surviving, really naturalistic attempts at depicting a human face. It's the Woman of Warka, sometimes called the Lady of Warka. It was stolen back during the Iraq War, which was from 2003 to 2011, I think, and then recovered when the war, gosh, I can't believe it's already been 22 years. But when that war first broke out, the citizenry of, what's the main city in Iraq? It's flown out of my head. Baghdad. The Baghdad Museum was looted. That was one of the first things that happened. Everyone broke in and took what they could. Never mind that it's just made out of rock. It doesn't have any real intrinsic value or material value. It's just rock. And they took them and ran off with them, and then usually a few weeks later they were recovered. This one was found buried in some guy's yard. But they dug it back up. Anyway, what do we see? We see a very sensitively carved representation of a human female face. The cheeks are very soft, and there's a lot of attention to detail, little chin, lips, even the eyebrow, which may seem a little odd to us now, but it would have been inlaid back in the day with probably some precious stones of some kind. She probably would have worn a wig as well, which is indicated by that little slot on top of the head. You could slip the wig on. It's a pretty big jump from our bird-headed man from the shaft grave from about 14,000 years earlier. You can see now there is an observational skill on the part of the artist. They can look at things, and now they can translate it into stone. Why do you think it's a goddess, Mr. Waterfield? Because they made it. They wouldn't just make stone portraits of any old schmuck off the street. This has got to be somebody worth something. So gods, goddesses, kings, that's about it. That's who gets their images made in artwork at this stage. Everyone else, you're out of luck. We don't have the concept of privately commissioned artwork. That won't come around for several thousand more years right now. And this is not really art. This is religion. This is life and paying tribute to unseen deities that control your destiny and your fortune. So you want to pay them whatever tribute you can. Scale is fairly accurate. It's life-size. You can see what it would have looked like with inlaid eyes and the inlaid eyebrows and the wig and so forth. Probably painted at one point as well. Most of these ancient sculptures, not just Mesopotamian, but Egyptian, Greek, Roman, all the way up until the Middle Ages, these sculptures were painted so that they would look more realistic. That's the ultimate goal. You want them to look alive. You want them to look like they could speak to you, or that they see you or see into your soul. That sort of thing, because they're gods, they're goddesses. That's the kind of power they have, and so that's what you want to communicate. There it is after it was recovered. Gosh, it just seems like yesterday when I was watching this news conference and the head of the Baghdad Museum came out and said, "Found it. It was in this guy's yard, but we got it back. We cleaned it up, and now it's back on display." Another object that was looted. The photograph on the far left is what it looked like before it was looted, and then the one in the middle is what it looked like when it was recovered, also hidden in some guy's garage or something like that. Not a lot of forethought put into stealing these objects. The goal is to steal and run. And so obviously there's a lot of damage that took place. This is the Warka vase, which is also related to the woman of Warka. It's a ceremonial vase, and on the outside we see the depiction of a sort of feast tribute to the goddess Inanna, and she is there in the center accepting gifts from her followers. Everything is sculpted in these horizontal bands that go all the way around, almost like a comic strip, sort of wrapped around. The most important things are at the top, our depiction of the goddess, and then as we go down, they get less and less important. So at the bottom, you've got crops. This is some corn and some wheat growing, and then above that, we've got cows and goats and sheep and so forth. And then we have slaves bringing all of the offerings to Inanna, and then there she is at the top receiving everything. She's also the biggest. So it's an early example of something called hierarchical scale. In the hierarchy, the more important you are, the bigger you are, and the higher up on the picture plane you are. And this is also something that will be used over and over, not just in the Near East, but also in Europe as well. It makes sense. The more important something is, the bigger it is. The lion's share of naturalism, which makes sense, these earlier cultures. This is a view down where some of the cattle and stuff were, and you can see that even our stockyard animals are a lot more realistic than they used to be. We still seem to have more attention to detail on the animals than we do the humans, except in the case of the god or goddess. They still get... Here it is today. It's been restored. I include this image of the ghost there to give you a sense of the scale. The scale of it and the elaborateness of the decoration tell us that this is a ceremonial vase. This is not an everyday item. It's not for serving lemonade at the table or anything like that. This is very important. And we know that because it's big. This would be a little unwieldy to bring out at Thanksgiving and serve everyone. Also, the intricacy of the decoration does not lend itself to being handled for everyday use. So these things that survive are usually for ceremonial use. Everything else, utilitarian objects, those weren't valued, and so very, very few of those have made their way down to us. So that's always a good indicator of something's function, is how elaborately it's decorated. All right. Gods and goddesses. So what is this concept of gods and goddesses? Well, we can't see them, but we know they're there. How do we know they're there? Because they make our crops grow, and they light up the sky every day. Anything that they can't explain, they don't really have science yet. So if they can't explain it, doesn't make sense, then it must be gods or goddesses. So they build temples, and they go and leave offerings. But I don't know about you, but I got things to do during the day. I can't be bothered to spend hours and hours offering prayers to different gods and goddesses. So if that's you, and you don't have time to pray yourself, why, you might invest in what's called a votive figure. And that's what these are. These are eternal prayer substitutes. They go and pray on your behalf, so you don't have to. Of course, everyone couldn't afford these, but your richer, wealthier merchants and city-state rulers could. The richer you were, the bigger they were. And then, so you get a whole scale of different sizes and so forth. They all have a lot in common. They're very simple. They're very geometric. These aren't gods or goddesses. These are just synthetic supplicants to pray on your behalf. And so they all have the pose of prayer. I beseech you to give us a good harvest. We still use this today. Isn't that the emoji for prayer? Thank you so much. It's the same thing, and that's where it comes from. We also see an emphasis on the eyes. The eyes are really big and huge. Why? Because again, we're starting to play around with the concept of facial expressions. If you want something to look alive, you look it in the eye. There's a whole emphasis on the use of the eyes and looking with smiling with your eyes, the evil eye, all of these things. If you want to know how someone really feels about you, you look them in the eye, which are sometimes called the windows to the soul. The eye betrays true motives and emotions and that sort of thing. So, if eyes are good, let's make them even bigger so they could hear my prayers. I don't want to make any mistake. I want to make sure that they hear my prayers and that they take them to the deity of my choice and give it to them eternally. One other thing I would point out, in addition to the somewhat simplified geometrization of the body here, there is an Eastern sort of love of rhythm and pattern, and you can see it in the patterning in the beard and the patterning in the hair. These regular, rhythmic, ornamental patterns, that tends to be an Eastern trait that we see over and over. And then later, that'll sort of metamorphose into a Persian style. We talk about the Persian influence. That all has to do with rhythm and pattern and ornament. And it becomes a trait of Eastern art, and then later Muslim art as well. There's a few more. Really, really disturbing and creepy. You're welcome in advance for your nightmare fuel for tonight as you awake in a cold sweat at 3 a.m. Votive! What are you talking about? It was art history. I'm sorry. So there they are. Big eyes, hearing your prayers and telling your needs. Going into battle on his behalf, and they're wearing their armor. They've got their pikes and their spears, and they're trampling over the bodies of their enemies here who are underfoot. And of course, the city-state ruler, the king, is the biggest figure because he's the most important. So there he is. He gets his own space all the way over there on the right. And here's the backside of it, where we have his patron god, Ningirsu. And Ningirsu is also attended by one of his symbols, the Imdugud bird, which is half bird, half lion. And then below that, Ningirsu is holding the Shushgal net, which contains his enemies. He's got the net in one hand along with the bird, and then in the other hand he's holding a mace, which is a rock at the end of a stick. And so you hold your enemies in the net with a stick, and then you just beat them to death because they can't go anywhere. And so that's a lesson for all you people who would dare go against the king of the city-state. This is your fate. So let that be a lesson to you. And of course, they're all suffering and in anguish as they are being beaten to death by this mace. And then on another fragment that has survived, we see vultures gnawing on the bones of the enemies there at the top over some early cuneiform writing. But what I like is that you can actually make out a spinal column here that's being chewed on by these buzzards. And then a few other body parts you can make out. There's some hands and arms and so forth as the buzzards munch away on the enemies of the king. Here is another object that has made its way down to us. It's the Standard of which is a little sort of banner holder, I guess you could call it. And it's about yay big. And then all of this is inlaid on the surface. It's got two surfaces. It's got a war side, which we see here. And then on the opposite side, we have the peace side. What do we see? Well, we have chariots being hauled by donkeys here, and they are trampling over the enemies of the king. And you can see the donkeys are gradually getting faster and faster. Their legs bend more and more as they progress. Here they're just sort of standing, and then the legs bend a little more and a little more, and now they're positively leaping over and stomping over all of the enemies of the king. Here are the soldiers, very orderly, very organized, very stable, and they are marching in the captured prisoners who are here all stripped naked to embarrass them and degrade them as they are brought before the king. And then here they are before the king, who has just left his chariot and is sort of surveying all of these poor Slavs who have been brought before him and now will become his slaves. There's a closer view of the chariots and the stomped enemies. I always like a good stomped enemy. So there's your detail of the stomped enemy. And then there's the king. We see that the king is bigger. In fact, he's so big the border can't contain his beautiful, important head. So what's this called? This hierarchical scale. Once again, the more important someone is, the bigger they are, the higher up they are in the picture plane. And so that's what we see here. And then on the other side, the result of war, peace. Why do we even have war? You have war so that you can have peace. You get rid of all of the dissenters and people who would conquer you, and you bring them all together into a single regime. And that's what's happened here. So in the time of peace, what happens? Well, we eat. We eat and party. So that's what's happening. Here's the king. I've ordered a new laser pointer, so don't fret. There's the king on the I found the connection. There's the king on the left. He's the tallest. His head is breaking the border. Here are all his nobles who are attending him at a great feast. Here are the slaves bringing the food for the feast, including a few goats that'll get barbecued. They've got some music. Here's Harpo Marx playing the harp or the lyre in the background, and then we've got some dancers for entertainment on the far right. It's all good. We've had a war. Now let's enjoy a time of peace. Let's enjoy the spoils. And then at the bottom, we've got more people bringing offerings and food in order to facilitate the big feast. And then there's our king once again with the same frontal eye on the profiled head. That's just par for the course now. Not a lot of naturalism. Everything's sort of simplified down. Just like the votive figures, the body's been reduced to a cylinder or a circle or a cube or something like that. Very simple, very rudimentary, but not for long. Eventually we will develop those into a more naturalistic. There's a closer view of the overall view of that standard of with an unwary tourist I happened to capture at the British Museum. Here is another element that gives us a little bit of insight into the Sumerian view of the afterlife. So most of the things that we see, not just in Mesopotamia, but also in Egypt, they're all recovered from tombs. And so we have to sort of view them with that in mind. The things that are put in tombs are put there for posterity, and so they refer to the afterlife, and they refer to the lives of royalty. Joe the plumber and you and me and everyday Joes, we don't get represented because we can't afford to have fancy tombs like this. So when you look at these things, keep that in mind. You're looking at something that was put in a tomb with the intent of it possibly being used in the afterlife. So what does it tell us? It's from a tomb, and it's a musical instrument, so they think that there's going to be music in the afterlife. So you're going to need musical instruments. They also found the remains of feasts in some of these tombs. There was one in particular that had not only half-eaten food on plates, but also the remains of servants. So there were some slaves who would offer themselves as sacrifices to the final feast for the king, and probably ate poisoned food, and then their bodies were left in the tomb to attend the king in the afterlife. What we see here is a lyre sound box. That big wooden dilly at the bottom is what makes the sound of the strings being plucked project out. On the front of it, we have a human hybrid-headed deity here. The idea of the human-animal hybrid is not new. We saw it in Mesolithic times. Remember the half lion, half man. So we still have things that are half animal, half human. We have animals with human attributes and so forth, because we're still developing our polytheistic pantheons of gods and goddesses. And so it's kind of a natural transition to use these animals that we're familiar with. The bull we saw a lot of last time. Bulls, typically images of fertility and power, sometimes royalty, just like lions are. But in this case, we have a bull, but with a human beard. That's the way you would put a beard on a human being. So half bull, half human. And then on the front, we've got some more inlay that shows us a few other things. Here's another example of what that would have looked like. This is a different lyre, but now you can kind of see how it all comes together and functions as a musical instrument. And then this is the sound box part right here. This is where all the music comes from. There's the front. You can see animals doing human things like bringing wine to people, or playing musical instruments, or raking the grass, or whatever you're doing. At the top, a very interesting figure called an heraldic figure. And a heraldic figure is simply a symmetrical shape that has a central figure with two flanking mirror-imaged figures on either side. It's an Eastern trait, and I point it out because that's one of the ways that we can find Eastern influences in European art, is the incorporation of the heraldic figure. It goes from Mesopotamia to Egypt, and then from Egypt on into southern Spain, up through the Pyrenees, and then into the rest of Europe. So a human usually flanked by two animals, or it might be an animal flanked by two different animals. But the interesting thing is the animals here, the two bulls, have the same face as the man. So you've got bull bodies, human head with horns, and they all have the same beard. Who are these people? Possibly characters from the earliest written novel, the Epic of Gilgamesh. That may be where this scorpion man comes from. He's a character from the Epic of Gilgamesh, and another example of an animal-human hybrid. Epic of Gilgamesh also written in cuneiform, the first alphabet, which we're about to have a look at. So all of these things, the presence of objects that we would use in daily life, games, weapons, musical instruments, tools, all of that suggests that they believe the afterlife was much like this one. So you needed to take it with you. If you use it here, you're going to use it in the afterlife. So plan accordingly when you make your tombs. So now we're going to examine the development of writing. Writing didn't just come about. There are a few developmental eras that came into play first. Some of the earliest attempts at a kind of writing are the cylinder seals. It's not really writing, it's more of a ownership tag. So merchants who would export goods like amphoras full of oil or honey or something like that, they would seal them with wet clay, and then you'd get a cylinder seal and roll it over the wet clay, and the images you see there in the clay are the result of pushing this incised intaglio cylinder over the clay. And the images that are there usually indicate who the owner is and who it's intended for and that sort of thing. Sometimes they would take inventory of the number of items that were being imported and exported and that sort of thing. Or you might seal a document that's being sent to one place or another with this as well. There's another example of the effects of the cylinder seal. It's a subtracted or intaglio carving, where you carve the reverse out of the cylinder, and then when you press it into the wet clay, you get the opposite of that. You get the positive. And then there's another one showing different things, different gods and goddesses. These star shapes usually indicate the presence of a god or a goddess. They take different forms. And then there's one more with a lot of animals dancing here, animals and humans dancing together, animals acting like humans, which would qualify them as sort of a human-animal hybrid. Eventually, the cylinder seals, we need a little bit more information and a little bit more variety, and so the development of cuneiform comes around, which are letters which equate to sounds, and then the sounds form words, and then you can pick the words apart and make letters or an alphabet, which give you a huge variety of expressions. You can carve out royal edicts, you can carve out inventories, some of the other cuneiform bits I can remember. There's a recipe for beer that has still made it down to us, and then there's another one that's a complaint about the poor quality of copper that this guy got in a shipment. But this gives you kind of an idea about how they sort of progressed. The Sumerians have symbols for words, and then the Babylonians sort of picked those up and then evolved those, and then the Assyrians used them more in a kind of alphabetical context with the same type of letter forms and that type of thing. There's another example of cuneiform, stories of gods and goddesses, poems, all kinds of things, origins of gods, founding of cities. The earliest great flood myth is in cuneiform. There's a Sumerian version, and then there's a Jewish version, and then there's a Christian version, all having to do with a mighty flood that took out most of the life on this planet at one time. There's another view, kind of an overall view. I just like the way it looked, so I took a close picture. I don't remember what it says, but you can get a sense of the shape. It's that kind of a triangle-shaped stylus, and you would press those into clay. And then in the case of more important documents, you'd take the clay tablet and then chisel it out of stone for more formal documents, religious documents. I think this is a stone one. And then it's not that big of a jump to translate cuneiform down into other languages, the Greek language, and then the Roman alphabet, which is the alphabet that we know and use today. So that's where writing came from our Sumerian friends. This is an Akkadian ruler. These were some of the cities in a different region of Mesopotamia. Sumeria is in the lower part, and Acadia is in the upper part. Sargon I was an Akkadian king. This is a bronze head of Sargon I. Again, very aloof, not very involved. A little smug, though. I always thought he looked a little overconfident. But, you know, he's a king, so what are you going to do? Made of bronze. The eyes were probably either shell inlaid or maybe even a precious metal, gold perhaps. something valuable. They were hacked out in antiquity and taken, maybe traded or melted down. Or maybe we're just trying to deface Sargon I and take away some of his power. But what we do know is that the love of ornament and rhythm and pattern is evident here. Notice all the plaiting and the beard there, all those wonderful ringlets and braids and patterns that still manifest in his beard. Same in his hairstyle. He's got the wonderful man bun with a little hair clippy thingy in the back. All of it, again, the result of lots of rhythm and repeating pattern and that kind of thing. All traits of Eastern art. Not a huge jump. I believe these two are only about 800 to 1,000 years apart. But we do see some development. If you compare this to this is definitely more developed over those hundreds of years. More attention to detail, accuracy. Probably kind of a portrait. We're not exactly sure because we don't know what Sargon I looks like, but it's a unique piece. There's no one else that looks like this. This is more generic. This is more about the idea of Inanna rather than it trying to represent a specific person. Other sculptures that have survived down to us, especially Akkadian ones. The Akkadians like to glorify military exploits like the Sumerians did, so we get a lot of glorification. This is a victory stele dedicated to King Naram-Sin, and you can see he is the largest figure. He's not the tallest. These two star-shaped images here are the tallest. Those are our deities. That's Inanna and Ishtar watching over Naram-Sin. Naram-Sin's wearing this sort of horned crown, which usually you only see on gods, but because he's a city-state ruler, he's almost the equivalent of a god. He's walking uphill, which is significant. Going up is a sign of victory, and then people who walk down are going to be defeated. And then we have victims, foes who would oppose him, begging for their lives, and then catching spears in the neck here. That's what's happening to me. And then we've got other defeated enemies here who are bringing tributes or getting stomped to death by other soldiers. We also have one of the earliest attempts at a representation in a landscape. It ain't much, but there it is. It's a tree, a single abstracted tree. We are not yet concerned with depth and perspective and light direction like we had in painting and that sort of thing. So, but we're showing that this is outside. So he's outside, he's walking up a mountain. We know it's outside because there's a tree. Trees don't grow. It's it's implied specific battles, but they're not. They're not historically accurate. This is more about the idea of the greatness of Naram-Sin rather than the recording of a specific battle. This is an interesting item that has survived. It's the votive disc of Enheduanna. Enheduanna was the daughter of Sargon I and one of the first recorded poets in history. And she's female. Also, the writer of the Epic of Gilgamesh is female, which may surprise us as we are accustomed to our patriarchal society and the diminishment of contributions of women. It is surprising to learn that the first recorded poet and the first recorded novel in the history of the world came from women. It's only later that men and women's status in society becomes unequal and inequitable. You can thank the Greeks for that. It's the Greeks that decide that man is the measure of all things and women just need to stay home and have babies. But you'll see that reflected in their art too. So not only was she a poet, she was the high priestess of Ishtar, And so here she is approaching with a priest and a couple of attendants, and they're going to the ziggurat of Ishtar to make offerings. All of that recorded in this disc, which is not too big, 10 inches in diameter. But we are seeing a few things that we know. The frontal eye on the profiled head. And Edwana is taller than everyone else because she's more important. It's very orderly and very stable, which is indicative of a successful kingdom, a kingdom full of prosperity and success. Now that we've seen that ziggurat, we're going to look at another ziggurat, the ziggurat of which is in a lot better shape. Thanks in no small part to Saddam Hussein, believe it or not, who decided back in the 1980s to rebuild most of the bottom part of this because it was in a state of disrepair. Unfortunately, he decided to incorporate some modern construction techniques, concrete, that type of thing. And then also a lot of the bricks that he had made for this have his name on it, so that he would be connected to ancient Mesopotamian dynasties. Imagine having to put your name on so many things to show people how important you are. I don't know what that sounds like something. Anyway, it's the same thing that we saw earlier. It's an artificial mountain. Here are the processional steps, and you'll walk up these processional steps. You can go from the left or the right or the center, and then on top, that would be where the cello would be. It's gone, but this local here has kindly decided to sit up there and give you a sense of scale, so you can see how big it was. Another artificial mountain in a place where there were no mountains. Kids, put your shoes on, and you're walking up to it, and you see it, and you're getting psyched up to go into the ziggurat. And then you finally get there, and then you go up the stairs, and then you walk through the gate tower, and then you walk out into a secondary courtyard, and you go up another flight of stairs, and then a third courtyard, and yet another flight of stairs, and then you finally make it up there. And then by the time you're up there, you're so jazzed up and excited to be in the cello that you could imagine seeing any number of things jump out and say hello. So there it is in about 2003 or so. Interesting story. Saddam Hussein decided to park two of his MiG fighter jets there. The Iraqi Air Force was almost non-existent. So he parked those jets there because this is a World Heritage Site, and he knew that the United States would never bomb a World Heritage Site. So we bombed it anyway, but we dropped flyers on it and said, you better move your damn planes because we're going to bomb the planes, and if they're next to this thing, it's going to get bombed too. And it was. There was a lot of damage. We destroyed the planes, and then they had to rebuild a lot of the ziggurat of because Saddam Hussein would not move his MiG fighters away. A few other photos from where the United States occupied this area afterwards and kind of kept everything safe, kept it intact. No more parking tanks, MiG fighters, and so forth there. This was a view from one of my online students back in 2003 who was stationed at the military base right next to it. That was his view of the ziggurat of He sent me another picture too of him studying his art appreciation from inside a tank. So I like to pull. I lost that picture. I wish I still had it because I would pull it out when people would complain about how hard it was to study for tests. Oh yeah, are you getting shot at in a tank in the desert? Well then you got nothing. You got nothing. Look, this guy's dedicated. Yeah, you made a C, but that's all right. All right, we'll take a little breaky poo, and today I have a man playing the silver lyre of It's a reconstruction of an actual lyre recovered from a tomb, so you'll get an idea of how that would have sounded if somebody played it. So smoke if you got 'em. This is about 3 minutes, 15 seconds. Enjoy. Get some water. Text your grandmother. Oh, I hope I get sound. I didn't even think to test out my sound. Wouldn't that be a rook? I got it. It's not coming over these. Go. Good stuff. All right. Moving forward. A few statues of some of our city-state rulers have survived. This one is of Gudea. There are about 26 or so of these that have made their way down to us. Other ones have heads. But what's interesting about this one is that we have our simplified geometricized body, which actually works very nicely to add cuneiform on the outside. So this records all of Gudea's exploits and his laws and that sort of thing, combined with an actual statue of him. It's made of diorite, which is a very dense, hard stone. The Egyptians do a lot of carving from diorite as well. There's another view, and you have a better idea of the cuneiform on the outside. It all works together pretty nicely. The face of one of the heads that has survived is not unlike the Lady of Warka that we saw, down to the shape of the eyebrows, but it still have a sensitivity to the carving of the face and the curve of the cheek and the curve of the mouth and that sort of thing. And then he has this lovely crown. It's sort of a king's hat that he's wearing, and you can see all those little embellishments on the outside, which could be weaving, or it could be inlaid stones or something like that. But they're very similar to all of the representations of Gudea that survive. They all look very similar. hat based on Jackie O's hat, former wife of John F. Kennedy. This was funny 25 years ago when I pulled that up. She's been dead for 20 years now, so anyway, same type of hat, pillbox hat. And then there's another head of Gudea. That one is hatless. Still kind of interesting, still same sort of sensitivity to the face. Where are the women? There are a few female effigies that have made their way down. They're not much different. The treatment of the body, there's not a lot of difference between depicting a male body and a female body. That will come, but it's not here yet, as you can see from the surviving statue of Queen Napirasu. Also, she's got her hands clasped over her abdomen, which may be a reference to fertility and giving birth and continuing the royal line and that kind of thing. We're going to see the law code of Hammurabi, which is a big finger. And then we have the law written on the body of the finger. Then we have this image of Hammurabi talking to Lagash on the top, on the nail part. That's me illustrating it for you so you can understand how fingers work. I'm not giving you the finger. Hammurabi is giving us the finger, and then he nailed it with the depiction on the. This is too much. Too many puns all at once. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So there's Hammurabi, and he's talking to Shemesh the god, who's got rays of power shooting out of his shoulders there. Those little curly lines are coming out. The god is seated. Hammurabi stands. And Hammurabi is talking, and we know that because he's got his arm raised. This is a universal symbol of God got something to say to you. So I'm talking, he's talking. What's he saying? He's probably getting the law, which is now being transcribed down here. It's Talion law, which is the basis of a lot of Old Testament laws from your Bible, things like an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth and that sort of thing. All that's inscribed down there. The relief is pretty high, which means they project off of the background a pretty good bit, so much so that the eyes can make eye contact with each other because they are so far in high relief. Again, made from diorite, that very dense, hard stone. Stone has a psychology. We talked about it with cave art. It's big and it's powerful and it takes forever to wear down, so it's a good kind of communicative device for things that are eternal and beyond time. Just like these two lions that sort of emerge out of the rock in this gateway that protects the city. You want to imply protection from enemies seen and unseen, so you have these stone lions. These would have been at the outer gate of a citadel, which is another type of city that develops. It's a fortified city, just like Jericho was, surrounded by big walls. But it's a little bit more complex in that we have our outer wall, and then we have an inner wall, and this is where the ziggurat would be and where the palace would be. So the king has a couple of extra layers of protection. But again, it's fortified because we're still at war with a lot of people. The palace itself is an image of prosperity and opulence to show how successful the regime is, but also to try and intimidate any ne'er-do-wells who think they want to come in and attack this city. You want to kind of overwhelm them with this sense of glory and power. These items are called lamasu. They're kind of a genie figure, guardian figure. It's half bull, half man, but with the wings of eagles on either side. And those are guardian figures, like sphinxes. You put them on either side of a doorway also to intimidate enemies who might be coming into the city, or unseen evil spirits who might be coming in to cause trouble. The face on the lamasu is usually that of the ruler. Very similar beard plaiting, similar everything. So the faces on these Lamassu are probably Sargon's grandson, Sargon II. And you can see Sargon on the left and compare, and then there's what they look like when they were being excavated, along with a local for scale, so you can see how big they are. They've got some at the British Museum if you want to go see them. They have 5 legs, so if you look at them from the side, they have 4, and if you look at them from the front, they have 2, but if you look at them from the corner, they have 5. So again, we're still figuring out perspective and depth and how to communicate all that. Probably painted during their day, at least some of them were, to make them look more real, make them look more alive, have them function better as guardian figures. Some Assyrian sculpted reliefs that have survived, they tend to be very low relief, and they usually record actual things that happen. We're not just glorifying like the Sumerians and the Akkadians did. Now we're recording things that happened, like these archers who are shooting arrows at these guys who are escaping, and they're floating across this river on inflated sheepskins in order to make it back to their fortified city. And these people have their arms raised in concern. Oh, I hope they make it. Oh, I hope they make it back to us. And then you've got other images of water and fish and that sort of thing down in the water. A king hunting lions. I put hunting in quotes because it was not really a hunt like we know it. The lions were usually tethered. Sometimes they were in a cage. Sometimes they were killed while they were still in the cage. But technically, the king kills a lion, so he's a mighty warrior. Same is the case with King Tut, as we'll see, King Tutankhamun, the boy king, shown from the back of a chariot hunting lions because he's a mighty warrior. He's a 13-year-old punk. He's not out there hunting lions, but he's the king, so you got to show him the way that you show kings. This one is an image of the sack of the city of Hamanu by Ashurbanipal. And you can see the invading armies leaving the city, and they've got lots of treasures that they've stolen, while the people on the city walls are dumping stuff down on them, beams, rocks, that sort of thing, and then the city itself is on fire. You can see the flames there in the background. And look, a few plants as well, because we're outside, so you want to include all that. Just, we're starting to consider depth and that sort of thing. Here's another image of the sack of the city, along with a lovely inscription. The city of Hamanu, a royal city of the land of Elam. I besieged, I conquered, its booty I carried off. Go ahead, laugh, it's booty. Everyone wants to laugh at booty. And then down in the moat, the dead, bloated corpses of their foes, along with the fish that are nibbling at their bodies. Few others. This is a dying lioness. Back legs have been crushed by a chariot. It's been shot with arrows, and yet it still tries to drag itself along with its muscular arms. Lion's always a symbol of power and nobility and honor. So even though it was a sucker for a fake lion hunt, we still have a lot of respect for it. The Babylonians really enjoyed touting their wealth. And so this is the former entrance to the city of Babylon, covered with all these wonderful enamel glazed bricks, which when assembled together in the correct order give us an image of lions or bulls or other animals on the exterior there. Also, it's a good invitation to get robbed. Hey, we're a rich city. Come and take what we have. That's how it would have been situated as you would enter in. It's sort of a victory arch the king would come back from different battles and so forth. In the background, you can see another ziggurat. That's the Marduk ziggurat, also known as the Tower of Babel. And then there's a closer view of some of those bricks that came together to form a lion. And then we have the Persians, the last great empire that emerges, one of the first and the last that we'll talk about in this area. They came from mostly this area, Iran, northern Arabia, and so forth. Eventually they conquer the Babylonians. They bring their style with them, which is very much about repetition and rhythm and pattern. This is the surviving Apadana of Darius the First. What happened to it? Rumor says when Alexander the Great came through and was conquering the Persians, he and his friends had a big feast in this hall and set it on fire while they were drunk. And so that's why it's no longer with us. But on the outside, lots of order, lots of stability, people bringing lots of gifts to the king because this is a rule of prosperity. I'm just going to burn through these last few. That's what it would have looked like back in the day, all painted up, symbol of opulence. You'll notice the columns there with capitals shaped like bulls. Once again, bulls, symbols of strength and fertility and power. And then there's another one. Let me get through here. Then we have the Sasanians, who were influenced by the Romans. This is from about 260 Common Era, and you can see the style there is very similar to the Constantinian carving style of the Romans. The fact that they're on horseback, it's an equestrian portrait. That's a Roman trait that these Sasanian ruler Shapur I is trying to emulate. And there he is conquering Emperor Philippus the Arab and Emperor Valerian. We see equestrian monuments on coins. This is when rulers start to realize the power of propaganda and spreading their image around through money and buildings and that sort of thing to kind of underscore how important they are. They did fine metal work. This is the repoussé method, where you hammer out the metal from the back to get this nice relief. And then the gold you see is a mercury gilding, where they mix together mercury and liquid gold, and then it evaporates, leaving behind a thin layer of gold that's applied to the surface. It's a very toxic process. Last thing the Persians gave us were textiles. Lots and lots of textiles. Carpets, cloth, these things could easily be exported, and it's one of the ways that the Persian style made its way into Europe and then eventually gets incorporated into manuscript illumination. We also start to use animals as decorative motifs, repeating animals, not just lines and registers, but different shapes of animals, including geese. Here are some Sasanian geese that made their way into some Chinese silk textiles, which I found interesting. So, all right, there you go. All done.